Right, this is the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and I need your help. You've probably seen all of the big reviews of the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max by now, and for that reason, I just don't want to sit here and regurgitate all that stuff. It's a waste of your time, it's a waste of my time, it all just feels a bit too familiar. But that isn't the fault of the big reviewers. They get what they're given by Apple come the embargo time, and they have to work with it. The problem is that when it's the iPhone they're dealing with, it's a bit dull. Now, this does leave me with a bit of a problem when it comes to reviewing this phone. So this morning I turned to Twitter, Instagram, and my blog and asked you guys what you want me to do. And loads of you got in touch. Thank you so much. I've not really had time to go through all the stuff yet, but the overriding thing, I think, was that there seems to be a lack of reviews or guides when it comes to upgrading from the 11, the 11 Pro or the 12 Pro to the 14 series. That's a really good point. I don't think many people have covered that. And most people probably aren't upgrading from the iPhone 13 Pro. Unless you upgrade every single year and you're a bit of a nerd like me, you're probably not going to do that. But the key thing that kept coming back, I've got some of the notes here, you'd love to see what it's like day to day. Someone suggested making a continuous review where I talk about how this benefits my own life throughout the day. Someone else wanted to see a side-by-side comparison of a notch-based iPhone against the new Dynamic Island, just to see what the difference is in terms of user interface. Someone also suggested that the car crash detection was probably the only new thing, and they asked me not to test that. I promise I won't. And then someone said, what is there to review? And that really got me thinking, because how do you review a phone that has been reviewed by all the big tech YouTubers and which is pretty similar to the last version? Now, I could go down the crazy wacky route and do a Mr. Beast and buy everyone in this town an iPhone 14. I can't afford that, so that won't happen. And I could also scale Everest and try out the new satellite calling stuff, but trust me, I won't be doing that either. The thing is, I've only had this for a few hours. That isn't long enough to do a proper review, but I do have some thoughts and I do have a request from you guys. So let's get into it. Firstly, a very quick word from today's sponsor, Benks. Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Benks accessories, and they have sent me 3 corkers for my new iPhone 14 Pro Max. The first is this hybrid case, which is constructed from DuPont Kevlar fiber. And just to get technical for a second, it uses a combination of high quality TPU frame material, a high density filament lining, and strengthened corner design to absorb shock. All I know is that I'm going to put this on this after this review and never take it off. That is, unless I need to, in which case this is a little bit easier to remove than a lot of fiber cases. I think this one looks great as well. It's got this kind of spiked minimalist design, and if you're wondering, it is completely compatible with MagSafe. They also sent me this 10,000 milliamp hour battery pack, which looks a bit like Apple's battery pack, but packs in loads more functionality. So you can charge it as normal by attaching it to the back of your phone. Very strong magnets, which is nice, but it has 2 ports, one USB-C and one USB-A. And that means you can technically charge 3 devices at once. So you can attach that to the back of your phone, charge it via the MagSafe adapter, and then attach something to the USB-C, and if you want, attach another thing to the USB-A. Really tough as well. I love this thing. And lastly, they sent me this, which is the Glass Warrior screen protector. This isn't on the phone yet, but trust me, just like that case, after this video, this is going straight on there. It's got 30,000 scratch resistant stuff built into it. It's, again, huge peace of mind. So thanks again to Benks for sponsoring this video, and you can check out links for all of these things in the description. This iPhone 14 Pro Max looks pretty much the same as the previous Pro Maxes that have come before it. The build quality, which is absolutely fantastic, the camera housing, the size of the screen. We know this stuff. It's all completely familiar. The colours are slightly different. I have the deep purple version here, which is okay. I think I like it. It's in most scenarios, it almost looks black. I think it needs to grow on me a little bit more. I would advise seeing the colours in person as always, because it's a very personal thing. So the only things separating this phone from last year's phone is car crash detection, satellite calling capabilities, a considerably beefed up camera system, and a couple of admittedly nice display related updates. But it's still very hard to buy a bad phone these days, as I've seen with things like the Nothing Phone 1 and the Pixel 6a. Both of those phones are vastly less expensive than the Pro Max. But this remains a brilliant, brilliant premium phone. If you buy one of these, if you've got the budget for the iPhone 14 Pro Max or the Pro, you'll absolutely love it. It's an iPhone, so it will be super fast. Benchmarks remain utterly meaningless when it comes to these things. The camera will take great photos. We do not need to compare last year's iPhone Pro Max with this year's Pro Max because they always look identical when you see those A/B tests. But we're also in the middle of a cost of living crisis where I suspect many people aren't looking to spend a shed load of money on a new phone. So what we definitely don't need from me today is just another review. What I think is interesting about the iPhone 14 Pro Max is the path that I'm taking to it. So if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that I've been using the iPhone 13 mini for the last year. I love this phone. I think it's easily Apple's most interesting smartphone of the last few years, mainly because of how small it is. And it really feels small now. I've been handling that. But it has been removed from the iPhone 14 lineup. The iPhone mini is no more. So I had to make a change. I went with the biggest one for two reasons. Firstly, the battery, which I'm hoping is going to be just as good as the iPhone 13 Pro Max, which was ridiculous. And the second thing is the beefed up camera system. And this is because this phone will play a key role in my vlogging channel, which will launch later this year. But what is it like to go from small to very big? Firstly, eSIMs are a pain in the backside. In the UK, which is where I'm based, we do get the SIM card. Sorry, US people. Yeah, I had to do an eSIM swap from this to this. I had to call the carrier because it didn't work properly. Then it didn't work properly after that. It took me a good hour to get it sorted, I think, in the end, overall. Whereas originally, you just pop the SIM card out, put it in there and be done with it. So eSIMs. But beyond that, the first thing you notice is the weight. The Pro Max is a heavy phone. It always has been, but I kind of found it a bit reassuring this time around. So when I got this out of the box, it was an initial shock, like, wow, this is pretty heavy. But the iPhone 13 mini now does feel not cheaper, but a little bit less kind of robust next to this. And it's the same thing with the materials. This feels and looks like a much more premium phone. I'd forgotten how much actually, but that's how it should be. This is so much more expensive than this. And the screen obviously does feel vast compared to the iPhone 13 mini. I'd got used to that small screen, but having that much screen real estate now, I think is going to be a benefit. The always on display, which you can see there, is weird at first, unless you've been using Android phones which have had always on displays for a long time. If you're a regular iPhone user, it will throw you. The first time you get your Pro or your Pro Max out of the box and put it down, it will look like it's still on. In fact, I thought I'd left the screen on. Again, I've not had this for very long, so I'm gonna have to see if it affects battery life and if it's an annoyance possibly. Dynamic Island? Well, it's fun, it's playful, it's got very addictive fluidity built into the animations, and more importantly than all of that, it's new. It looks different. It makes the iPhone 14 Pro Max and the Pro feel like a brand new device. It does give you that out of the box, fresh, new feeling for an iPhone that I don't think we've had for a long time. I think more impressively, it feels immediately comfortable, even familiar. So when you start playing music and stuff like that and you flick up the music player and it disappears into the dynamic island, that just feels right. It doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel unnecessary, and it doesn't feel like the stupid touch bar on the old MacBook Pros. The cameras, well, I've not had this for long enough to do a proper camera test, but I will be doing that in 2 weeks' time. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell not to miss that video. This is where I turn to you guys. I've not had this phone long enough to assess details like the dynamic island, the always on display, and that new camera system properly. And going back to those chats that I had on social media earlier, it's clear that people now want to hear from reviewers who have been using this phone for a decent amount of time and have given it proper real world testing. That's why in 2 weeks' time, I will be returning with a more thorough review of this phone. I absolutely promise. I'm giving you the chance to get involved in that review. So, what do you want to know about the iPhone 14 Pro Max? What excites you about it? What doesn't excite you about it? What has Apple done to this phone that bothers you? What questions have you got running through your mind before you buy one of these? And also, which device are you considering switching from? Is it the iPhone 11 Pro, the 12, the 13, or are you going from the 13 mini like me to the big one? Please get involved in the comments section. Let's make the 2-week review of this Pro Max the definitive one. Well, maybe not the definitive one, but another one to add to the list of things to watch. I've got another device on the way next week, which I'm actually more excited about than the iPhone 14 Pro Max. It's the Apple Watch Ultra. I don't need it at all, but I've ordered one and, well, I've talked about it already on this channel. So keep watching for a link to that video.